Don't let anyone bury your dreams. Hi, welcome to the Self Up. This time, I want to talk about the inspiring story of Albert Einstein. A genius scientist and an influential person of the 19th century. Einstein's name is now identical with genius, and his discovery that E equals mc squared has been studied by millions of students around the world. Albert is one of the greatest scientists of all time, and won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921. Although Albert is now recognized as a genius, his life was not easy. He was once considered stupid and useless. However, none of this diminished him. His great love for math and physics kept Albert working until he was able to contribute positively to the history of mankind. I will tell you his story, hopefully it will be useful for all of us. Albert Einstein was born into a middle-class family in Germany in 1879. His father was a famous engineer and salesman. The era his father lived in was different from the era Albert was born in. In his father's era, there were no electric lights. Houses at that time still used gas and oil lamps. In addition, horses were a common means of transportation. From that era, technology progressed quickly. Albert was born in the same year that Thomas Alva Edison invented the electric light bulb. A year after Albert was born, his father moved to Munich to set up a company selling electrical equipment with his uncle. The business was successful, and by 1855, the family was living well. Nowadays, the name Einstein is associated with the word genius. However, little Albert was not a gifted child. He only started talking when he was 3 years old. In fact, his parents took him to the doctor to check if he had any growth problems. Later, Albert told them that at that time, he liked to form sentences in his mind, but never said them. That's what made his parents so worried. Albert's life in elementary school was also ordinary. His grades were okay, and his most prominent grades were in math and physics. Albert's success in learning depended on how much he liked the subjects being taught. Apparently, his passion for math and physics came from the company his father kept. When he was 4 years old, his mother discovered that Albert had a talent for understanding mechanics like his father. At that time, he was playing with a compass given to him by his father. In 1988, Albert entered a high school that had high standards. For example, they had to learn Greek and Latin. Albert had a unique character. He likes to learn in his own way instead of following a guide. This attitude often got Albert into trouble with his teachers. When he was 10 years old, Albert learned from his uncle named Jacob Einstein. His uncle also had a unique habit. He liked to buy Albert books for the next school year. This way, Albert learned before class started and could get good grades without being active in class. For example, Albert learned Euclid's geometry on his own at the age of 12 and calculus at the age of 15. That way, he had time to do what he liked. Albert's selfish behavior carried over into college. At that time, he often skipped classes that he didn't like, and chose to hang out at coffee shops. To pass the exam, Albert rewrote the notes of his classmate, Marcel Grossman. In this way, Albert succeeded in having a high score, and even surpassed Marcel's score. He didn't experience any difficulties in college, and managed to graduate with a bachelor's degree in education for math and physics. At that time, Albert wanted to work as an assistant professor. But unfortunately, none of the professors would accept him, because of his rebellious character. After 2 years without a job, Marcel's father offered Albert a job as an assistant examiner at an intellectual property office in Switzerland. There, he was responsible for evaluating patent applications for innovations. This job gave him free time to study and conduct scientific research with the theories he had in his head at the time. In 1902, Albert and 2 friends, Conrad Habicht and Maurice Sullivan, founded the group the Olympia Academy. They met regularly at Albert's apartment to discuss physics and philosophy. This group had a significant role in Albert's intellectual development. 3 years later, in 1905, it was a magical year for Albert. In that year, he had published 4 scientific papers. Albert's work made a great contribution to the field of modern physics and changed many people's views on time, space and energy. Despite being called a magical year, all these scientific works did not make Albert famous. Luckily, by the time he published his third scientific paper on relativities, his work was seen by Max Planck, known as the father of quantum physics. Max recognized the intelligence of Albert's scientific work. In fact, Max once said that he hadn't seen work like this since the days of Isaac Newton. Later in the year, Albert published his scientific work containing the formula E equals mc squared, which became the scientific basis for nuclear energy. Slowly, academics began to recognize Albert's existence. Then, in 1907, Albert presented a different concept of gravity, and his proposal was accepted. From there, his image as a scientist increased, and he was invited as a guest lecturer at the University of Bern, one of the most popular universities in the world at that time. In 1921, Albert was awarded the Nobel Prize for his services to theoretical physics and the discovery of the law of the photoelectric effect. This discovery was the first scientific work he published in 1905. Albert was a visionary and lived in the future. Therefore, his work was only appreciated 15 years later. During his lifetime, Albert published more than 300 scientific papers and more than 150 non-scientific works. There are interesting lessons from Albert's life. Despite all the rejection from many people and the education system at that time, he never gave up and continued to do what he liked. He didn't allow anyone to bury his dreams. Albert stayed focused on developing theories, experiments, and research until history finally noted. No one can predict what life will be like. Imagine, Albert was a child who had difficulty speaking when he was 3 years old. He also had a rebellious character and liked to skip class. Then when Albert just graduated from college, he was jobless for 2 years. But such a person is a genius scientist and has works that benefit mankind. Albert realized that if you are different, other people would oppose you. Therefore, he was never afraid of life's difficulties and continued to do what he loved without having to follow what others were doing. Albert was a hard-working person, had a strong desire, and did not give up easily. He is also often dubbed as a mad scientist, Nobel Prize winner, and his name is a synonym for genius. Being a genius is not easy. When you're different from others, few people can understand you. However, never stop doing what you like. Please comment in the comment section what lessons you learned from this information. Thank you for being here and supporting Self Up. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and comment with your suggestions for future reviews or topics. Subscribe to stay updated on all things books, motivation, and self-development. Keep aiming higher, and I'll catch you in the next video.